There used to be a ballpark here, Wrigley Field in Los Angeles, home of the eponymous Los Angeles Angels, who played in the Pacific Coast League. Here at this Wrigley Field from 1926 to 1960, and then one more year in 1961, the first year that they were an expansion team in the American League. 21,500 people could sit in these stands at one time, and upwards of 25 or maybe even 28 with a shoehorn. And they loved to watch their Angels play, especially the crosstown rivals, the Hollywood Stars, and all the others who came from San Francisco and Portland and all of the other cities on the West Coast and in the far West. And they saw some great baseball here, too. And no one was greater than Steve Bilko, the hulking first baseman, after whom the show Sergeant Bilko was named by Phil Silvers, its star, who admired Bilko the player and said, "I figured he needed some help." Help doing what? Breaking into the big leagues. Bilko had already been to the show. In fact, he played a total of 10 years in the majors, including 1954, his best season with the Cardinals, when hitting between Stan Musial and Enos Slaughter, he batted .319. Yet, for some reason, he never got the break he deserved, and he didn't quite make it in the show. But here, he was the whole show. In 3 successive seasons, 55 through 7, he won the MVP 3 straight times, won the batting title twice, the Ribby Championship 3 times, the home run title twice, hit 55 in 56 and 56 in 57. And according to historian Galen White, author of the Bilko Athletic Club, it was Bilko more than anyone else who sparked interest in baseball in LA and also made it seem plausible that there should be a major league franchise here. And eventually there was. And wouldn't you know it, in 58, Bilko, who by then was playing for the Cincinnati Reds, was swapped to the Dodgers in exchange for none other than Don Newcombe. And so he came to play in LA, except not at Dodger Stadium, which hadn't been built yet, but at the Coliseum. His time there was brief, and eventually he found his way back to LA as a member of the Expansion Angels, and he hit the last home run ever at this field off Mudcat Grant on the same day that Roger Maris hit his 61st homer, October 1st, 1961, 3,000 miles away. By the next year, Bilko had it, finished out his career in Rochester, and by then the Dodgers were at Dodger Stadium, and here is one of their dream fields in honor and in memory of Wrigley Field, owned, of course, by Philip K. Wrigley, the magnate of the Chicago Cubs, who owned much of Catalina Island and lived and died much like many of his rich predecessors here in SoCal, rather than in the Windy City itself. Zachary Taylor designed this ballpark when it was one. He had designed Wrigley Field in Chicago and Comiskey Park. The dimensions weren't exactly the same, but the atmosphere was. So was the overall architecture. It was, as they would say nowadays, an iconic park. As children, we all watched a show called Home Run Derby. It was done right here, filmed at Wrigley Field when it was still standing. It was demolished in 1969 to make way for an athletic center, a rec center, a community center, and a hospital right in this same complex from 41st and 42nd to San Pedro and Avalon in South Central, not far from USC, not far from downtown LA. Rumor has it that there was a brothel across the street from here somewhere, and that Walter O'Malley didn't want the Dodgers to play here. If so, perhaps it was because he feared the competition or the athleticism of the opponents next door. It surely had nothing to do with prudish morality. Rumor also had it that there wasn't enough parking here. I can attest to that. Every space is full. I was lucky to squeeze into one myself, and all they've got going for them now are games between and among children and adults, the way baseball was meant to be played, by amateurs for love of the game on fields of dreams like these. And yet Wrigley Field endures in memory at green, fresh as the day it opened. There are no baseball fields in heaven, but there are some diamonds here on earth, and this is one of them. In fact, it was named Wrigley long before Wrigley Field in Chicago got its name, even though Wrigley Field in Chicago was built a decade earlier, even more so. Like father, like son, like daughter, like mother. Oh, and of course, the Dodgers have put up a replica of their own scoreboard here, just to remind everybody who's boss. Tell that to the Angels in Anaheim, will you? Or the ones that still have halos on their heads. Perhaps because they remember when Dr. King spoke here in 1963, only a few months before his I Have a Dream speech. And the stands were packed for that one too. And the memories of that echo. Steve Bilko died in 1978 in Nanticoke, Pennsylvania, his hometown, just shy of 50 years of age, and just a few days before he would be eligible to collect his pension as a 10-year Major League vet. Somehow I have a feeling he's here too, along with all the crowds who came to see him and who came to watch Satchel Paige and Dizzy Dean and Bob Feller and Lou Boudreau and Gene Bearden and Bob Elliott and all the others who toiled here for love and money and for love of the game and all the games that are yet to come. The Coliseum isn't far from here either. O'Malley didn't want to play there, but he ended up there. He wanted the Rose Bowl. Instead, he got a bed of roses in Chavez Ravine. After all, those who did live there were kicked out to make his baseball paradise possible. As they say in Quebec, je me souviens, Montreal used to be a Dodger farm club. We never forget. And we should never cease to thank those who came before us. July 17th, 2022. Los Angeles, California.